be around best practice from migrating from VMware to HyperV. So we've got Charndre May, who's going to go through this with you today. It's going to be quite an informal session. It's really not a PowerPoint demonstration. We'd really like some interaction. Charndre is from ABS, and he's a solutions architect for ABS. These guys just use this opportunity to get all the information you need from Charndre. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Linda. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Can everyone hear me at the back? Do I need to use the microphone? Is it down here? Fantastic.
It would be difficult because they can't hear you, they can't say it.
Yeah,
Can't answer the question.
All right, fantastic. Thanks, guys. So, as Linda said, it's a very informal, formal session, if that makes sense. So, I'm not going to bore you and give you a PowerPoint slide decks. I don't really believe in it. I believe in an interactive session and maybe a session based on actual live experience from customers. So, I'll maybe just start with an introduction of ABS and who we are. So, ABS has been around in the IT market space for the last 19 or 18 years. Traditionally very much focused as a product-based company based on firewall solutions, endpoint protection, and anything security-based. A couple of years ago, almost 5 now, there was a new introduction into the business whereby we introduced Microsoft services, specialized Microsoft services as part of the capability offered to ABS. And the core focus is consulting services and services itself, not so much software, not so much hardware. Those are the building blocks. We absolutely on-sell them as part of our offerings. However, as I said, those are the building blocks, and a solution should be defined by either software or hardware. So today, well, before I get into that, so as part of our infrastructure division at ABS, we're a Microsoft Gold partner, a managed partner through Microsoft as well. So we have a very strong cohesion with Microsoft, and we do a lot of consulting services with Microsoft. Our portfolio in the Microsoft space extends from traditional on-premise technologies such as Active Directory, Exchange, a lot of virtualization, a lot of system center, and then obviously walking into the cloud space in terms of hybrid deployments as well. So that can be from Microsoft Azure to Office 365 to Dynamics CRM and whatever it may be like that. So we have a very vast portfolio. However, that portfolio is very focused as well. We're not a jack of all trades and master of none. We're pretty much a jack of all trades and master of none. So if you need anything from us, I have got my business cards in front here. You guys are more than welcome to grab them and give me a call if you need. So based on that vast portfolio, I can tell you how to talk today. But today I really want to focus on what we do in the Microsoft HyperV space. So I know the session is targeted at best practices from VMware to HyperV. However, I'm not here to slander any one vendor above the other. So I do have preferences, obviously, and being a Microsoft Gold partner and get it from us. However, I'll talk today about how we tend to approach these situations first. So I'd really like to touch on understanding the customer, understanding the customer's requirements, also knowing that no two customers are the same. Yes, the requirements may be very similar, however, they're not the same. There is no replica of one customer or the other. In the educational space, we've done a lot of work as well. So I'm not going to stand and bore you with corporate talk, not at all. I won't lie, the largest base of our customers are corporates and public sector in terms of government departments and municipalities. However, we have done a lot of work in the educational space as well. So I'd like to talk about understanding customer requirements. Once you've understood the customer requirements, where do we go from there? What are the next steps? How do we communicate to the customer when local changes, when preparing to transition from one platform to the other? So a VMware to HyperV migration or transition is a re-platform. It's not a new place upgrade. It's not always a seamless upgrade either. So I'd like to talk to you about some of the challenges, some of the lessons learned, and understanding how we tend to approach this. So in the majority of cases, when a customer comes to us and we discuss moving or transitioning from VMware to HyperV, I won't lie. Generally, the basis for that is one thing. It is a licensing or a cost discussion. And that's where the solution, or that's where the requirement stems off from. So, again, I'm not slandering VMware at all. It's a great product, and I still believe that it is the leader in virtualization. Maybe not by a long shot, but they have been in the market space for a hell of a long time. They have always been the leaders in VMware and in virtualization, and there is a lot of respect there. However, costing is an issue. So obviously, budget restraints happen all the time. We have customers that come to us that need a solution, but a very cost-effective solution. Now, VMware, as I said, is great. However, it does tend to be expensive. And specifically because of the modular-based costing on VMware, whereby it doesn't really offer you an all-in-one solution under a single license. You buy the hypervisor platform, and from there, you would then run into the operational management suite of VMware, but does come at a cost. And each item or each component that you add into the solution comes at a different cost. Whereas Microsoft's HyperV, it's an all-inclusive cost within the operating system license. Now, understanding that the operating system license needs to be applied on any virtualization layer, whether you're on VMware, Citrix, Zen, or Microsoft HyperV, you still need to apply the operating system license. So where I would pay for a VMware hypervisor cost, on Microsoft, I wouldn't pay for that hypervisor cost because that cost is embedded into the operating system. So generally, that is the core reason for a customer transitioning from VMware to HyperV. Understanding the different requirements. So is it a scenario whereby the customer wants to pilot HyperV? They've been entrenched into VMware for a long time, they've had the investment and they've served out their investment. So now it's time to start saving on costs. And they want to toy with Microsoft HyperV. And generally what we do is we would start the process of design. We don't implement any solution without a sound technical design. And a lot of the times, depending on the size of the customer and who the customer is, those designs are vetted and verified by Microsoft directly. That interaction happens with us and Microsoft and then presented to the customer. So understanding that the customer wants to maybe pilot or POC HyperV, they want to understand does it deliver the same functionality as VMware. They're very well versed with VMware. They understand the constraints, they understand the functionality. Can Microsoft give me the same thing? I've heard a lot about Microsoft HyperV, and I've heard that it does play in the same space, but does it actually? So generally what we tend to do is we'll tend to start with a POC or a pilot. That pilot or POC will be focused on some sort of a dev environment, so a development environment, or low-end candidates. So we want to take line of business application service, educational services, financial services. Those aren't good candidates to start with. We'll start with the dev environment. The other big consideration to make is that because we're moving cross-platform, it's not as simple as putting in a device or putting in a server next to VMware and literally just copying and pasting the virtual machine across. It's not as simple as that. The experience can be made as simple as that, but there's a lot of architecture that's required in the back end and a lot of understanding that goes into preparing for that. So I'll give you an example. We had a customer who had, let's say, a 4-node VMware cluster, and attached to that is maybe an HP or a Dell SAN or whatever it may be. It is not possible to share that infrastructure, that compute infrastructure on storage level and at host level, at host server level, between VMware and HyperV at the same time, simultaneously. So essentially what needs to happen, part of the consideration when going through the design and when going through the costing exercise with the customer, is to understand, do we have existing equipment that we can use that we can spin up in parallel to create a side-by-side transition? And if not, that needs to be factored in. So can we, for instance, take some priority workloads, shift them over to maybe 3 of the VMware hosts, and we then dedicate one host to HyperV. We will break that host off of the VMware cluster and introduce it as a HyperV host and then start the transition from there. Other things to consider is that if the customer does have storage, does the storage cater for HyperV? Now, understanding that virtualization is virtualization, but one vendor's virtualization strategy does differ to the other. So it is very important to have the architectural design in place to meet the specific business requirements. Now, when we do these migration approaches, it's a very intensive process with the customer. Planning is absolutely everything. So planning is probably 80% of the work and only 20% execution. Planning in terms of not just understanding what are the size of my virtual machines, who accesses those virtual machines. Is it a virtual machine that's only accessed internally on the network? Is it something that's public-facing or internet-facing that has users accessing it via some sort of remote services externally? What is the downtime that is allowed on that application? Do I have a business or a customer that is a 24/7 shop? And how do I then combat that constraint in terms of migrating from VMware to HyperV? So the approach and the customer interaction is very key and is probably the most important part of any transition process. Understanding that as I said earlier, no two customers are the same. You will get the scenario where one customer has more leeway in terms of downtime than the next customer. So planning that transition period with the customer is utmost key. In terms of the lessons learned, I'll talk a little bit about some lessons learned later on, and I can honestly say that some of the lessons learned is not enough preparation, not enough communication to end users. Some customers that run extremely, they do a high turnover or turnaround of tenders. So getting downtime over a weekend sometimes isn't even possible. So it's very important to communicate that to the customer. And if you are planning downtime, follow the right change control processes, communicate extensively to the end users, not just to the customer contact, not just to the IT manager or your contact on site. Help and assist the IT manager and your IT contact on site. Develop those communications with them and send those communications out to the users on their behalf. So, just in terms of a migration approach and a migration strategy, so if we had a customer that has come to us and said, we want to take our 4-node VMware cluster, we want to move it to HyperV, we're done with VMware, it served us great, but it's now time to do cost saving and we want to transition. The first process, as I said, would be to undertake our designs. We'll go through a lengthy design process, and we will design every component of the virtualization strategy, not just for HyperV, for VMware as well. There's a lot of consideration that needs to happen when planning the transition from VMware to HyperV. Some of those things, like I said, could be the way that the storage is designed, the way that the hosts are designed. So, do I want my HyperV host to be a full edition server where a user could log on, they could have a start button, and they could go through the different configs, and they could essentially play with the server? Not best practice. So we recommend a core edition on a HyperV host. So pretty much when you log onto the server, all you get is a command prompt console, and that server is locked down. That is the same. It is the same interface as a VMware interface. If any of you have logged onto a VMware host, you'd understand that it's all gibberish. It's all Linux code. Microsoft's HyperV hosts on Core Edition serve the same purpose. It has a much lower security footprint. There's a much lower presence for untrusted users to access those systems. A lot of times what we find is that IT administrators, general operational IT administrators, who aren't necessarily skilled in the technology, they're not necessarily permitted to access that technology, they will log onto these systems, they will install updates, they will install some antivirus, and they don't understand the implications. So securing your virtualization environment on whichever platform you're on, HyperV or VMware or Zen, whatever it may be, security footprint and security considerations need to come first. Once you've addressed the security considerations, how do we actually move the workloads? How do we transition our workloads from VMware to HyperV? If I do have downtime, that's great. What is the period of my downtime? Because it is very difficult to anticipate the length at which a virtual machine can be moved from one platform to the other. Understanding again that, as I said earlier, it is not a seamless exercise. I can't take a HyperV host and integrate it directly next to VMware as part of the same cluster and do a migration of that virtual machine. I'm doing a cross-platform migration. So once you've got your two environments up together in parallel, there needs to be a process whereby you schedule downtime. If you don't have downtime and you can't get downtime, the downtime on critical systems, let me rather put it this way, critical systems would not be the best candidates to pilot a HyperV migration, not at all. You need to do dev workloads, you need to do some test workloads, you could even provision some test virtual machines on the current VMware platform and simulate the process to the nth degree. Document that process, take that process back to business, show them we've thought about everything, we've considered the downtime period, we've considered security, we've considered how our storage is designed on the other side, we've considered how users will access the application, and I have communicated to my users that there will be downtime for a certain period. So if we don't have downtime, what do we do? And it is a common world problem. We have it as more and more so. Customers are starting to minimize periods of downtime. They're starting to increase their service level agreements. They're starting to increase business continuity and disaster recovery criteria, whereby they create a 24/7 shop. If I look at some of the big customers, such as South African breweries, the Investex, the likes of Standard Bank, these are customers that cannot have downtime, they can't afford it. So how do I take a virtual machine or a system from one platform to a completely different platform, and it's on completely different hardware, it's its own self-contained unit? So there are applications that can do it for you. If you look at the likes of Platespin, and there are some Microsoft technologies available as well that can also do it for you. whereby it will create a copy, so it will interface, not necessarily on the virtualization layer. There are ways that you can do it on the virtualization layer. I could tell my application or my migration tool to interact with VMware on a back-end or an infrastructure level. So it understands from a host perspective, it knows all the configurations of the host. It understands the configuration of the virtual machines. It can then interface at that level to shift that workload onto HyperV and bring that workload online. The shifting of that workload isn't a move. So it's a non-destructive, and it needs to be understood that it's a non-destructive move. What it will do is it will copy the virtual machine, the virtual machine hard drive file and configuration files. It will copy it to your new platform, your HyperV platform. Only once the copy is done, will it then synchronize the last memory changes, and you can then offline your server on VMware, and you can bring that virtual machine up on your HyperV cluster. That's the offline conversion process. The online conversion process, like I said, you'd have to do something like FlateSpin or something like System Center Virtual Machine Manager. However, getting away from downtime is not simple. You need to accept that there probably will be at least a 10-minute downtime window, even for applications that can't really have downtime. So again, that comes down to the communication to the customer and how you have communicated to the customer. A lot of the times, customers have developed their back-end applications, be it line of business, be it an exchange solution, be it a SQL solution, whatever it may be. Generally, those solutions have been configured for native high availability. That high availability is done through the native application-aware high availability features. So a lot of the times on an exchange or an Active Directory or a SQL, we would use the application to deliver the high availability and not necessarily the hypervisor layer. Can the hypervisor layer do it? Yes, absolutely. We can have a SQL cluster or an exchange clustered solution on top of a HyperV cluster. There's nothing that stops us from doing that. However, the preference should always remain on the application's native abilities. The application is more intelligent in terms of an application level, and possibly a database level, and maybe a log level, a log file level, to understand that if my system is down, or a certain protocol or part of my system is down, I can fail that virtual workload over. In a scenario where you rely on HyperV or your virtualization platform only, it is not intelligent enough, or it may not be intelligent enough to understand that only a certain portion or a Microsoft Exchange service is down. What it will then do is it will fail the entire virtual machine over. A lot of times what you'll get is you'll get something called a split brain. So what happens is the application understands that it is still up. It doesn't know that it's down yet, but the hypervisor layer now understands that the application is down. So you've got the same application trying to run in two different places, and that's where we get what's called split brain, where the application doesn't really understand what needs to go wrong and it's a little bit fuzzy. So you really want to avoid that. The process in avoiding that, I'm going to come back down to again, is the design. The design needs to cater for these types of things. So, what are my business continuity requirements and for which system? What are my disaster recovery requirements and for which systems? Understanding that we can go down to a granular level where we can design the HyperV layer, virtualization layer, to cater for different HA and disaster recovery and business continuity needs for different systems. So with Windows Server 2012 R2 and with System Center Virtual Machine Manager, we can prioritize not just servers or applications, but solutions. So if you have a three-tiered solution whereby you have a web access front end and an application server and then a database server, so a three-tiered solution, it's not just a matter of taking the database server and failing that over first, and then the application server. So the HyperV layer is now intelligent enough to understand that those three servers form part of a solution. And when failing over, and the failover could be between different hosts in one data center, it could be across a data center, across data centers. It will understand that it needs to move those application servers together, and it is intelligent enough to understand that the database server has to come up first, and then the application server, and then the web server. So that intelligence is built in, but again, it comes down to the strategy and how we recover those machines or fail those machines over. Now, I spoke about failing over virtual machines between a cluster on-premise in the same site or across multiple data centers. Understanding that there's a fine line between disaster recovery and business continuity. So disaster recovery is a manual process. It should never be an automated process. So if my virtual machine or if my environment is down, you shouldn't have the application or have configured any sort of automation workflow processes that will automatically transfer those virtual machines to the secondary disaster recovery data center or a second regional site and online it. A disaster recovery should be a manual trigger. So I know things have gone pear-shaped, it's not going to be up within the next couple of days, manually shift them over. A lot of the times there's fancy technology available. If you look at Microsoft Orchestrator, if you look at Service Manager and Operations Manager, we can facilitate that, and we've done it. You can set certain triggers. So for instance, I could do a basic ping to my hosts. If my hosts don't respond within a certain time frame, I know my hosts are down. I could add a second trigger to that, to perhaps ping something like a domain controller, something that's fundamental to that environment. And if I don't get a certain response back, I could tell the application to automatically provision those machines or fail those machines over to the secondary data center. However, you don't want that. Somebody walks into the server room, a vendor walks into the server room, and they trip the power. That application or that workflow doesn't have the intelligence to understand that somebody's just tripped the power and that power will be back within an hour or two. And then what you're faced with is a scenario where your entire data center or your entire infrastructure is now active within a secondary data center, which is not so simple. What happens to how users access that secondary data center? Do you have high availability or load balancing across both data centers that dynamically understands that irrespective of where my application lives, I can access that application? Chances are no. Chances are that you have to do manual DNS record redirect. So I've got to redirect my external DNS record to the secondary data center. I've got to update possibly my Active Directory or my internal DNS records to understand that it doesn't live on the same IP subnet as my primary site. It's now my secondary site. So a lot of consideration needs to go into that, and I strongly recommend that a DR scenario or even a business continuity scenario is not automated, however it is controlled. So once we transition our POC or our dev or test, whatever you want to call it, once we've taken our pilot servers across and taken them onto HyperV, what then? So just because the server is online and I can access the server and I can ping the server, doesn't mean that I've got a successful migration or a successful transition. Extensive amount of testing needs to happen from there. And I'm not talking about 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month's worth of testing. Understanding your time frame constraints with your customer. So some of the basic tests that could be put into play, just I/O levels. What level of disk input outputs am I getting on my new solution? And then it gets a little bit more complicated. Is that as a result of the new storage solution I've got into place? Am I leveraging the same storage solution? So earlier I said we can't share the same infrastructure. That is true, but there is a factor that goes into that as well. So I can't share the same storage solution in terms of a LUN allocation or in terms of a storage allocation. So if I have a 4 terabyte storage unit that I dedicated to my VMware environment, whereby my VMware configuration and my VMware hard disk files are located there, I can't share that same storage unit with HyperV. What I can do is I can carve up a separate storage LUN or a separate storage unit on that same storage device, that same SAN device, and I can then dedicate that to HyperV. Now, this is where some consideration needs to come into play as well. So if I do have, for instance, storage constraints on the new environment, is it as a result of the same of the storage platform, understanding that I'm on the same storage platform? Is it something to do with HyperV? Are there some tweaks that haven't been done on HyperV? Understanding that HyperV as a solution is pretty much a out-of-the-box, a simple deployment. It is up to the administrator or the deployment team to understand and to be well versed on HyperV to understand certain things, such as VMQs. So VMQs serve a very specific purpose. However, what happens if I do ping my server out? Now I've moved it from VMware to HyperV. Now I'm getting massive latency. The server's spiking, it drops some ping packets down there. What do I need to look at? That's where we start looking at things like VMQs. So VMQs are great in certain scenarios, but they can be a hindrance in other scenarios as well. And this is where the training and the understanding of the technology needs to be in place. Also understanding that a lot of customers who have invested a long-term strategy with the likes of VMware, they may not be well versed in HyperV. And what works for VMware and some configurations that are done on VMware may not work on HyperV. So the training part of it is also very, very important, and that experience part of it will come out as you start administering the environment more and more so. So once we've got our pilot machines onto our new deployment, and everything is resolved. There are no more storage issues. There are no more latency issues or performance issues. Where do we go from there? What do we do from there? So this is a process that then generally starts with the customer where we plan the migration of the production workloads in phases. So we strongly recommend that the phased approach be done as opposed to let's dedicate one weekend and we take all virtual workloads. Have we done it before? Yes, we've done it plenty. However, the sleepless nights, the concerns, the stress level that you go through on the next day or Monday morning, it's simply not worth it. And you're opening not just yourself, but you're opening your customer's business up to too much risk. So a phased approach should be considered. Also understand that you've got your two environments in parallel. At the same time, what you've done is you've dealt with a rollback plan. I can roll back my HyperV to my VMware environment if need be. I'm not getting the performance out of HyperV. For instance, HyperV just isn't delivering the functionality that the customers wanted. You've got a rollback plan. However, with that said, I haven't seen a scenario in the last 10 years that we've been doing this, that we've taken a customer to HyperV and then back, be that from a VMware platform, from a physical server platform, or from a Citrix Zen platform. So the confidence I'd like to give you is that the application itself can deliver what it needs to deliver. In terms of functionality, we had endless debates. What's better? Is VMware better? Is HyperV better? They're the same. Yes, absolutely. I completely agree. VMware is stronger in certain scenarios. If you look at VMware's DRS or its Site Recovery Manager, that is technology that is well developed and it's been around for a very, very long time and it works extremely well. Can Microsoft offer a similar solution? Absolutely, it can. However, there is integration required. There is design required. There's a lot of thought that needs to go into it. It's not as simple as allowing a platform to dynamically move hosts to another platform. You've got to understand the intelligence behind it. You've got to build the intelligence behind it. And that intelligence is based on certain criteria. So, is my server up? Is my server down? Do I have certain thresholds? Once those thresholds are reached, what do I do then? So, by using the likes of System Center Virtual Machine Manager, if I can give you a scenario, we'll understand that I've got my 4-node HyperV cluster. I've transitioned from VMware and I've moved over to HyperV. However, my virtual machines are not equally balanced, and my resources specifically, not necessarily the virtual machines. There's nothing wrong with having 200 virtual machines on one host and 20 virtual machines on the second host, provided the resources, the compute platform resourcing associated to those virtual machines are equally balanced, not necessarily equally, but they are well enough balanced across the hosts. Another consideration to make is something called rapid provision, something we see that a lot of vendors and a lot of customers and providers don't consider at all. So for instance, I've got a 4-node HyperV cluster, and the total of resources in that pool within that cluster might be 2 terabytes worth of RAM and endless amounts of CPU capability, which is fine. However, what we have tended to notice is service pool. So virtualization is absolutely great, but it is the single platform that will kill your environment in terms of service pool. So a user will walk in, for instance, and say, well, I need a virtual machine, a small virtual machine or a small server. It's easy for the IT administrator to provision that virtual machine. It's quite simple. New virtual machine, configure it, and give it to the end user. The next guy comes in, the same process happens. At the end of the day, you notice, where's all my space gone? Where's all my resourcing gone? Now, the planning that the CIO or the IT director has done has fallen off the radar because I've allowed service fault to happen. How do we combat that? So, with the likes of System Center Virtual Machine Manager, and you can do this through a manual process. However, it is a very strenuous process for an IT administrator to kind of manually keep track of which servers live where, how many servers are in the environment, what is my storage and my CPU and my RAM capacity looking like on my HyperV cluster. So with some intelligent systems and not that expensive, we look at the likes of SCVM, System Center Virtual Machine Manager, we are able to do things such as dynamic optimization. We'll understand, there is my cluster. It looks at the cluster from a holistic point of view, the cluster as a whole, and then on an individual host level and a virtual machine level. People understand, I've got the same amount of compute resources available within each host. However, host 1 seems to be very overcommitted compared to host 2 or 3. What do I need to do? The application will dynamically shift those virtual workloads. between host 2 or host 3 or host 4. You can do that. However, those triggers need to be put into place. The other benefit to something like dynamic optimization is something called core parking. So, for instance, you run a massive data center environment, understanding that your production applications and the majority of access done by your users or external consultants, whatever it may be, to that environment only happens during the day or during the week. What do we do to become more green in terms of IT? We can do things like I said, like core parking. So we can the application understands that come after hours, my application isn't being used or it's not being used as much. Shut down some of the physical cores on the process on the server and bring them back up online tomorrow morning. And in the process, you're saving on power, you're saving on cooling, you're saving on all that type of stuff within the data center. So those are some of the initiatives that are built into the application and some of the intelligence that can be done through the application. However, if it is not done correctly, you can cause turmoil. So it is a process that needs to be done very carefully, it needs to be thought out, and it needs to be planned together with the customer. The thresholds or the criteria that I put into place at customer A won't necessarily meet customer B. They might be extremely different. So those are just some of the considerations to take into play. So I spoke a little bit earlier about some of the tools that can be used. Now, understanding that there's a vast amount of tools. There's, like I said, placement, which is very expensive, and that should only be used, or I recommend that it only be used in a very specific scenario. If we look at the likes, like I said earlier, of Investex and the standard banks, where they're doing platform upgrades. They're shifting physical workloads of Windows Server 2003 to a virtualized platform on Windows Server 2012 R2 and HyperV. How do you get the application across seamlessly? That's where the likes of placement comes into place. Or App Zero, you understand that you can lift and shift the application or that server in an online state. Some of the other applications, in terms of offline conversion, so System Center Virtual Machine Manager, where I can take a physical server and I can convert it to a virtual machine. I can take a virtual machine on VMware or Citrix Zen and I can move it to HyperV. Now, another benefit of System Center Virtual Machine Manager is that it is heterogeneous. I can manage my VMware environment and my HyperV environment with the same console. There are licensing implications and there's understanding that needs to go into the licensing. So, for instance, just because I've got a vCenter investment doesn't mean that it will simply integrate into my System Center Virtual Machine Manager solution. I still will have some sort of a licensing component and some sort of technical integration to enable that to happen. However, that process is rather seamless. And the benefit and why System Center Virtual Machine Manager is still a favorite in the market for those scenarios, so one hypervisor to another hypervisor migration, or a physical to virtual conversion, or even a virtual to virtual conversion, is the fact that it can be done through a single console. I've got access to one system. That system will give me a holistic view of both environments or multiple environments. You could decide to do physical to virtual conversions in conjunction with virtual to virtual conversions. That virtual machine manager will manage that process. Now, as much as I've harped on about virtual machine manager and how great it is, understanding Microsoft's strategy and where Microsoft is going, that the support for virtual to virtual and physical to virtual migrations won't be extended for a long time within System Center Virtual Machine Manager. As part of Microsoft's Azure strategy, there is a big drive to leverage Azure Site Recovery to facilitate that migration. Now, the dynamics have changed. So, what do I do now? So, I have the option to convert the traditional physical to virtual or virtual to virtual from one hypervisor platform to the other. But at the same time, I could convert a physical machine, a traditional on-premise machine, straight into Azure. I should consolidate that workload. I don't have to consolidate it onto a HyperV host. I can directly take it up into Azure if I wanted to. I could also use Azure Site Recovery to enable replication of key business critical applications between my on-premise environment and Microsoft Azure. Now, understanding the universities, there may not be an appetite right now to have anything hosted in Azure. And in fact, from a government perspective, anything cloud related is still very, very frowned upon and still very reserved for good reason. Data sovereignty, data residency, where does my data lie? Who has access to my data? Can they interrogate that data? What does that mean for me as maybe a financial institution or a government institution? So I'm not saying You have to use Azure Site Recovery Manager. I'm just saying keep that in mind and understand the benefits that it can give you. Also understanding that you don't have to go to Azure, not at all. You can have two data centers, data center A, data center B, and they don't even have to be dedicated data centers. It doesn't have to be a data center that's been hosted by a full-on service provider like a Terrico or an MTN business or whatever it may be. It could be a regional site. You could have site A in Johannesburg and site B in Durban or Cape Town, and you've got sufficient link speed between those two sites. And you want to create a disaster recovery strategy for either one of those sites, or maybe Johannesburg is your head office, and Durban is your secondary office, or both those offices are big offices within your environment, big branch sites within your environment. You have active users in both sites, and you want to protect both sites. Now, instead of investing in infrastructure into protecting both sites to maybe a third leg site, we could do a cross-replication of those two sites to each other, provided we have the hardware platform in place to support it. So I can take my line of business applications from my site A and replicate those servers with HyperV natively at no additional charge. That's the most important thing. I'm not trying to do a sales pitch here. At no additional charge. The charge for that lives and dies within the operating system license. If you buy a Microsoft 2012 R2 data center license, you have all this functionality included. I'm not talking about System Center Virtual Machine Manager. That is something separate, and that performs a separate function. But the native operating system will give you the ability to replicate from site A to site B, and then you can extend that through to site C as well. So the introduction of 2012 R2 gives you the ability to be a 3-leg hop. There is a constraint, and I'll be honest about it. We can't replicate from site A to site B with HyperV natively, and then replicate from site B into Azure. So that support is not there right now, but Microsoft are working on it, and that is something that should come out soon. Has it been a constraint? Absolutely it has. We've had plenty of customers who love the concept. I can replicate natively through my Windows OS. I can replicate key virtual machines from site A to site B and then to site C. I own another site C, but I can't do it to Azure. So understand that constraint, understand that it will be corrected in the coming months and probably with certain. So what are some of the lessons learned? So I think for me the key takeaway, if I to generalize over the past 8 or 9 years, customer communication, absolutely key. There's nothing worse than getting a phone call from a CIO Sunday night at 11 o'clock or Monday morning at 7 o'clock and systems are down. You're running there like a headless chicken, you've got absolutely no idea where to start. The customer has no idea what's going on. You haven't prepared the customer well enough, and again, like I said earlier, not just your IT contact on site, but end users. The end users are the ones that are going to give you grief. Anybody that's done a mail migration, exchange migration, whatever it may be, you'd know when that user walks in the next morning, they can't send an email, things are going to come down on you badly. And the same thing happens with any platform migration. It is the underlying infrastructure that you're affecting of not just the business, but every user in that business. And that type of heat, you don't really want that type of heat. So I think that's probably the key takeaway. And then secondly is the design. Now we've interacted, and again I'm not slandering anyone, but we've interacted with multiple vendors and OEMs, the likes of Microsoft and VMware and all these players directly, and then service providers who on-sell these services. So what we have found is that generally they don't put forward a design that caters for the needs, not just the needs and the requirements of the organization, but the design that will address the architectural principles for the underlying infrastructure. If I could give you an example, so we spoke about replicating from site A to site B. Of course, it works great. However, do I understand my customers' recovery time objectives and recovery point objectives? So if a disaster had to happen, at what point in time do I want that information to be restored back to, and how long do I have to get there? Now, those are considerations that need to be made. You might find that application A or solution A, which consists of multiple applications, it has a very different requirement to solution B. How do I architect the underlying platform to cater for that? And those are things that need to happen on an architectural level, and they can't just be flown in on the cuff or off the cuff when you walk into the site. So that I would reckon is a second consideration and a big lesson that has been learned as well. And then also the support structure. So specifically moving from a VMware to a HyperV, it does tend to be a little bit overwhelming. I've changed consoles. The console isn't familiar. The hypervisor platform, in terms of the features it offers, the features may be very similar, but the way in which I access those features or enable those features may be very different. And this is where the training comes in. It is utmost important that training down to an administrative level is done and extensive training is done. Also, create some sort of an escalation point. So I'm not well versed on the IT support structure within the university, but what I would encourage is some sort of a support structure. So for instance, my tier 1 can escalate to a tier 2, to a tier 3. And possibly I have some sort of an agreement in place with some service provider who can offer me escalation support here. So those are the basics I wanted to talk about. Key takeaways in my mind: communication down to the customer and extensive planning when undertaking these exercises. Any questions?
You look shell-shocked. Go on, Tishle.
So can you convert a VMware virtual machine to Azure?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. So if you had a VMware environment and you want to convert that virtual machine not just to your HyperV environment, let's say you're not going to spin up a HyperV environment, your CRO, your IT administrator or manager has given a directive that we're doing away with traditional infrastructure. We're not investing into any infrastructure on-premise anymore. We're going to displace our current VMware environment or even our current HyperV environment, and we're going straight to Azure. That can be done. You can take your VMware workload from your VMware cluster and you can shift it straight from there into Azure. Understanding what I said earlier, it is a non-destructive move. It is not if you want to move a file, for instance, in the operating system, and you do a cut and a paste. It's not that. It literally copies everything first. It does a synchronization back to check that the copy has been done successfully, and it will then transfer the last memory pages and networking traffic across, and then whatever the last changes need to be made. Bring it online, shut it down on VMware, or shut it down on VMware, then bring it online. If you have issues with the Azure, you can obviously always roll back. But it can be done very efficiently.
But can you do it vice versa?
So
from Azure to...
So you can, yes, absolutely, and that's the Azure site recovery. So the benefits of that, you look at Office 365 deployment. You create a hybrid configuration from your on-premise environment to Office 365. What does that do? It gives me the ability to provision users wherever I want. Do I want them on-premise? Do I want them in 365? Provision using 365 because he's a sales consultant. His role has now changed. He's now been brought back to an administrative position on-premise daily. What do? Okay. Same concept applies with virtualization. So in establishing your HyperV environment on-premise and then the connection to Azure, all right, through Azure Site Recovery, I can shift workloads up and down. The consideration that needs to be made there is bandwidth. 100% bandwidth, absolutely nothing else. The firewalling and networking and how I design my networking to support the application does either in Azure or HyperV is one thing. But the time it takes to get that virtual machine up and to get that virtual machine back down, that really needs to be considered. Absolutely.
But you can use VMware to VMware and that you stay on VMware. You don't have to.
Oh.
So as you can run VMware completely.
So how about the specific VMware that you had on premises? Now you mentioned my VMware as well. I'm getting issues like that.
So you don't migrate to VMs. You don't migrate to VMs.
Yeah,
So what will happen is, so let's say I've got 4 VMs configured on premise. I now want to move my workload into Azure. It won't leverage the same VLAN. You would create a site-to-site tunnel or a site-to-point tunnel between your on-premise environment and Azure. That allows the communication up there. The minute it goes into Azure, it's going to live on a separate subnet. We do not aggregate subnets across sites, not at all. The only time that we will do that is if you have a building A and a building B, for instance, in a campus environment, and the back-end infrastructure can support it. The minute it goes up to Azure, it's a brand new subnet, and you've got routing configured that allows you to go from there back down. Also understanding that and this is outside of obviously VMware to HyperV, but this is an Azure consideration or any cloud consideration. It's utmost important to extend your Active Directory environment from your on-premise into Azure if you are hosting Azure services. I'm not talking about Azure AD, I'm not talking about that at all. I'm talking about hosting and spinning up a virtual machine, mounting it to the domain, putting it or DC programming it as a domain controller, and having the Active Directory replication. And this goes back down to what I said earlier, where you should always leverage the application-aware availability features before leveraging the virtualization features. The advantage of having an Azure virtual machine up in AD, or the AD virtual machine up in Azure, is that you're going to lose your primary site. How do you support, from an Active Directory and DNS perspective, the virtual machine that you're going to fail over or host in Azure? It's got to come from that domain controller.
Yeah, just for interest sake, I think you did mention it, I must have missed it somehow.
Yeah.
What equivalent does Microsoft have for VMware's P2B technology?
So they do. And I hope you don't know the answer, I hope you're not trying to trick me yet. So they do. So System Center Virtual Machine Manager from System Center 2007 could always do it. System Center 2012, System Center 2012 up to Service Pack 1 also gave you the feature to do physical to virtual conversions. However, the introduction of System Center 2012 R2 dropped the physical to virtual conversion function. It still retained the virtual to virtual, however, the physical to virtual functionality has been dropped. The reason for that is twofold. There's an application called Microsoft Virtual Machine Converter, either version 3 or 3.1. That will do your physical to virtual or virtual conversions for you. And that application, it's a very small tool, it's been designed specifically for VMware to Hyper-V migrations. That's the one. However, the support for that ends July 3rd next year. There will be no more support and there will be no more download capability of that application. The reason being, Microsoft will transition to Azure Site Recovery. Azure Site Recovery will do it all for you. Just because it's an Azure tool doesn't mean you need to leverage Azure. Not at all. It is a tool that you can use to still convert physical to virtual on-premise. You could take it to Azure, or you could take it to another data center. So Azure Site Recovery, that should be the tool that you use to focus on physical to virtual, virtual to virtual, and then whatever other scenarios. Yeah.
Last question.
Yes.
You mentioned earlier about the government, how they're concerned about the data infrastructure and very secure in that. So from an education institution, what protection is in place for when you've moved your AD over to the cloud, that's not breached or the AD credentials aren't leaked or something like that?
So, and this is why I say it's very important how you do that. So if I just say, I'm going to provision my AD on Microsoft's Active Directory, Azure Active Directory. That's a different scenario. That is, you're literally bringing up that's not spinning up a virtual machine or anything like that. That is federating your Active Directory with a subset of Azure's Active Directory. There, and I'm not saying that they can access it. All I'm saying is that you're more prone to those conversations coming up than if you host your own virtual machine in Azure as a platform. So that is platform or infrastructure as a service. What happens there is that nothing can interrogate or intercept your environment. Because what you're doing is you're extending your environment. You're extending it from our primary site to another site. And there's a big misperception in terms of cloud, and it's starting to work its way out systematically, but there's a big misperception that somebody owns my data, somebody can access my data. Not at all. You do it correctly, all you're doing is you're extending your environment to a secondary site. That secondary site just so happens to be hosted by a cloud provider. However, they cannot access your data. It's still your Active Directory. You still got to log into your same Active Directory. You still got to provision usernames and password on your Active Directory. Microsoft don't have access to that. It is the same argument as somebody saying, well, what do I do to protect my on-premise environment from someone accessing my data? The exact same concept. Nothing changes. But like I said, the misperception is that it's hosted somewhere across the world, and I'm not actually sure.
It's actually kept on the second side.
It's exactly it.
And if you want any about what Microsoft is doing around protecting your data, your privacy, transparency, all that stuff, is just do any internet search on Microsoft Trust Center, and you'll find everything is all we publish everything about how we controlling that, and also the third-party auditing that happens in the certification we receive from third parties that will verify that what we say is accurate. Just with Microsoft Trust Center and put everything about Azure over 65 and and even any lawsuits that we've had, how we handle it, what's going on with the
Yeah, and also with that said, Microsoft's Azure platform was the first, and I think that might still be the only public data center that is ISO certified in terms of security. So there's that.
Okay.
Fantastic.
So
Thank you very much.
I hope it was valuable. So